So, over 4 years, we have had chaos over chaos, the Middle East, Russia, Chinese aggression. And the reality is, when the new administration comes in after 4 years of what we saw after Biden Harris, they have to clean it up. And it is not easy to clean up. The world is in chaos, the world is in fire, and now it's up to President Trump and his incredible staff to help clean things up. America is leading again, which is what the world kind of expects after 4 years of doing absolutely nothing. So to help break this all down, I have a dear friend of the show, a dear friend of mine for years, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. He's a deputy assistant to the president, senior director for counterterrorism of the National Security Council. Doc, good to see you.
Been far too long, my dear friend. Great to be on your show. And let me just start by saying, God bless you for going into the lion's den of fake news every day on CNN. After 8 years, they let me back onto Jake Tapper 2 weeks ago, and I think he's still licking his wounds from that. But God bless you for everything you do, Sir Michael.
Look, Doc, I text you after that interview, and guys, if you haven't seen the interview, you got to Google it. It was an incredible interview. And Doc, I got to tell you something. Even Jake was smirking a little bit, which tells me that I think he actually enjoyed the back and forth.
Well, he might be a masochist. I don't know if he's into, sadomasochism, but look, let's be clear. That was me being nice. I went to that interview, and one of my team members from the CT director, the counterterrorism director, ran after me before I got to the studio to say, oh, by the way, the comms team at the NSC wants you to play nice. And I was like, that was me playing nice. So I wasn't allowed to do the full double-fisted flamethrower, but maybe Jake enjoyed it. You know those guys better than I do, my friend.
Well, look, Doc, I think you handled yourself well. I think you presented from a position of strength in terms of our new leadership role in the world, in terms of the importance of our military, and in terms of going after these terrorist organizations. I mean, look, we saw after 4 years, disaster after disaster with the Biden administration, from the issues in Afghanistan. We saw the soldiers killed there. It was a nightmare. I hope you guys let some of those people who were involved with that go. We have seen an increase in anti-Semitism across the country, and the Biden administration seems to have placated to people in Palestine. Nothing against, the innocent Palestinian people, but let's be honest here, Doc. A lot of people there support the terrorism against what we've seen with the Israelis. So again, I say all of that to say you guys have done a wonderful job of showcasing to the world and to terrorists, wherever you are, the United States will hunt you down if you threaten our security, our freedom, and the security of our friends.
Yeah, to your point, I'm actually hosting a group of GWAT veterans in the White House this week, Global War on Terror veterans, who are just mortified, horrified by what the Biden administration did, the capitulation, the surrender of Afghanistan. So we're going to bring them into the building to listen to them, to recognize them for their sacrifices in that benighted part of the world that led to the death on that horrific day of 13 of our servicemen and women, more than 160 Afghans. And it was one of my greatest moments. I mean, look, it was only day 41 of the administration. It was the night of the president's joint session and his speech to Congress when I was on the tarmac realizing my number one goal as Senior Director for Counterterrorism. Day one, I wrote on my whiteboard in my skiff in my secure compartmented information facility the letter J, which back then was the classified, the first letter of the classified name Jafar, which is the name for the architect behind the Abbey Gate bombing that led to the death of those 13 heroes. And I wanted to move heaven and earth, along with Tulsi Gabbard, along with John Radcliffe at the CIA, to find that man and kill him or having brought to justice. And 41 days in, I'm standing on the tarmac with Tulsi, with John, with Pam Bondi, with Kash Patel as the DOJ jet lands. And on board is the architect of that massacre, who we have brought to justice. And to your point, brand new member of my team arrived on deck today, a colonel. Everybody gets their White House pass and they need a lanyard. And on my team's lanyard, this has become a kind of news item. I've put one acronym from a viral tweet by the president. It's WWFY and WWKY. This is the first acronym, the first statement from the president's viral tweet after our counterterrorism operation in Somalia in the second week of the administration. And it stands for, very simply, you want to kill Americans? We will find you and we will kill you. And that's the president's message to any terrorist who threatens Americans or our allies or our partners.
And Doc, speaking about that, we will find you, we will kill you. About 2 weeks ago, we launched some strikes against the Iranian-backed Houthis. The president, I believe, maybe a day or two ago, just announced to Iran, you have a set number of time to give up your nuclear program, or essentially there will be hell to pay. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. So in the biggest counterterrorism defensive operation since the inauguration, we were here in the West Wing, in the Situation Room, with Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, with the whole team for the first strike. Then we did the Houthi operation, which is still ongoing. And why are we doing that? It's very, very simple. Mike Waltz, the first ever former Green Beret to be National Security Advisor, briefed the president on what has been happening in that sea lane off the coast of Yemen, how our ships have been fired upon 146 times in the last year and a half, how a U.S. vessel has not been able to traverse that waterway unmolested for more than a year. It's the route to the Suez Canal. It has a huge proportion of global shipping, not just U.S. shipping, that hurts our economy. And he said, stop it. Get rid of that threat to the U.S. economy. And that's why under Pete Hegseth, as Secretary of Defense, we've launched that defensive operation about one thing: freedom of navigation on the international waterways, because President Trump wants to have free trade, safe trade, freedom of movement for all ships, U.S. ships especially. And that's what he's about. He's not a neoconservative. He's not an interventionist. He's not about invading other people's countries or doing regime changes. But if you are threatening the livelihood of Americans, if you're threatening the U.S. economy, well, you quoted him, there will be
hell
to pay.
So, Doc, do you think those initial strikes were enough? And as it pertains to Iran, I mean, we've played this dance for years, Doc. I mean, going all the way back to the Obama administration. Give up the nuclear weapons program. Oh, we are. And they never really do. They always find a new way to disguise what they're doing. I mean, is this going to be different? And if they don't give it up, where does that position us? And what do you think the president is prepared to do?
So to your first point, I get, keep being asked by, fake news journalists, how long is it going to take? How many days is it going to take? I always tell these people, do your flipping homework. Read what the president posts. Within 2 hours, 90 minutes of the birds, dropping their ordnance, the first, the Houthi Missileer UAV leader being taken out in Yemen, the president posted a pretty detailed and factual and candid statement of what we're doing. And in it, it had the answer for how long it's going to take. And in it, it will take for as long as is required for freedom of maritime movement through that waterway to be effective. That's it. I mean, if ships aren't safe, then we're going to keep pounding the jihadis. It's that simple. To the question of Iran, which of course is the nation that is sponsoring and providing weapons to the Houthis, it remains the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. It has a whole slew, a panoply of proxies, Shia and Sunni, because, if you're killing Americans or threatening Israel, they'll help you out. And President Trump has been just this morning, it's funny you asked, I said, hey, I want to see this letter. So I went to the person who drafted it for the president before the president put his own spin on it. And I read this very short letter. It's 2 paragraphs to the murderous regime in Tehran. And it's clear that the president, and I'm just going to quote what Mike Waltz, my boss, the national security advisor, said at the weekend on, I think it was Fox News. He said, it's non-negotiable. The letter is clear. Utter, complete dismantling of the Iranian nuclear bomb program.
And
That
Doc,
is,
not to cut you off, but can you explain to the audience and our viewers, why is it so important for the president and for the team to have such a firm position on Iran giving up that program? Because Biden didn't do it, Barack Obama didn't do it, but you guys are taking a very, very different approach. You're not negotiating here. You guys aren't messing around.
well, first, let's start at the kind of big picture historic angle. Listen to everything President Trump says about these types of weapons. I mean, this is a man who is, because he has all the briefings on the power of our nuclear weapons and the nuclear weapons of our enemies. And he knows, just listen to his voice, how horrific these weapons are. And he wants to make sure that the minimum number of countries have them and that we restrict them, and if possible, reduce the number of these weapons around the world because they are so apocalyptically horrific in their power. It's like the language he uses with regards to Ukraine, Sir Michael. He talks about, the meat grinder, the loss of, young men, Ukrainian and Russian, every single day in that horror that is the war in Ukraine. So number one, it's just a horrific weapons set per se. And then secondly, this isn't the UK, this isn't France, this isn't Israel we're talking about, that are nuclear nations that we can trust as allies, as partners. This is a nation that every Friday since 1979 and since the revolution has said one thing from the pulpit. It says the little Satan Israel must be destroyed and the great Satan must be destroyed. Well, guess who the great Satan is? We are the great Satan. So this is a regime that is Islamo-fascist. It is a dictatorship. Ask the women of Iran what it's like to live under that fascistic theocratic regime. And it is a regime the president has been explicit on, must not be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons because they have been very candid about their intent to use them against those they deem to be their enemies, including the United States and our friends in Israel.
Yeah, look, no, Dr. Gorka, I got to tell you, I think the vast majority of the American people would be in agreement with the president on this, because what it appears to me is that the president is really forward looking and forward thinking in terms of the dealings with Iran. And he's thinking, maybe I will not be president once this program is fully developed, but I want to prevent, I don't know, 6-7 years from now, a developed nuclear program, not only threatening Israel, but also threatening Americans domestically, but also other places around the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is a window we have right now. We have to fix the absolutely destructive force of 8 years of Obama and 4 years of Biden. Remember what happened. The JCPOA Iran deal from Obama gave them a timetable. It didn't stop nuclear weapons acquisition. It simply put it on a timetable with a little bit of a slower fuse. On top of that, the horrific amounts under the Biden administration, tens of billions of dollars were released to Tehran. One of the most tragic aspects of the first Trump administration, which I served in, is by the end of the first Trump administration, because of what President Trump had done with this incredibly swinging set of sanctions, the regime in Tehran was on the precipice of collapse. I mean, the Tehran Stock Exchange, thanks to our president, had lost more than 50% of its value in less than a year. If the president had had a second consecutive term and maintained the Iranian maximum pressure campaign, the regime would likely have collapsed, and the people of Persia, including the ethnic minorities, would have taken over control of their country, and Iran could have flourished again. Instead, we had 2020, Biden comes back, JCPOA, the recrudescence of this unbelievable pandering relationship with the mullahs, tens of billions of dollars unleashed, and that's what we are having to undo, at Mach 3 right now.
Yeah, yeah. No, look, I think it's important. I think about a lot of young people. There was this recent poll that came out by Atlas Intel polling in February that showed 52.7% of young people age 18 to 29 support the president. That's unprecedented. And I bring this number up, Doc, not to get into the political weeds of things, but to say a lot of young people are looking at President Trump to say, hey, we don't want to go fighting in some foreign conflict that has nothing to do with what's going on in America. Mr. President, do whatever you can to keep us out of that. We saw what happened in the past. It did not bode well for America or America's interests. So, Doc, I would venture to say that the president has unanimous support from Americans old and young to move in the direction that he's moving to prevent these forever wars.
Yes, and it's not just that, as you try and point out to the incredulous audience at CNN and your colleagues around the table. It's seemingly the Democrats have no comprehension of what happened in November. I mean, first time round, it's 64 million. Then we have 77 million for the president.
Yep.
And look at the polling figures. It's not just, we don't want to go to war in the Middle East. Look at the reactions, the latest polling concerning the president's policies with deportations and the border. What issue? I mean, you are a strategist, you're a political mind. I can't remember the last issue that had 74% support across the political spectrum in America. Well, guess what? The deportation of rapists, murderers, child traffickers has a 74% across the political spectrum support. Can you remember an issue that had that level of support in America? No.
It never happens. It never, ever happens, and I'm glad you brought up the topic of immigration. That, that's the last point I want to get with you. I know you're busy. You got to get back to work, keeping us all safe. President Trump said that he would classify cartels as terrorist groups. One, explain the importance of this classification for the American people. And two, what does this mean moving forward in terms of the president's overall strategy to combat illegal immigration, which, again, the vast majority, even Democrats, are saying they give the president high marks on what he's doing so far.
Yeah, and that incredible line from the joint session of Congress where the president said, "Oh, it's so strange. The Democrats told us for 4 years you needed new legislation to fix the border.
All they needed was Trump.
All they needed was a new president." And God bless Tom Homan, Governor Noem, Stephen Miller, Pete Hegseth, who's working with DHS to secure the border. Look, it's very, very clear. When I had my Newsmax show, I tried to put the open border into perspective, and I just did the math. And I did the math of how many Americans have died in combat since the end of World War II. So starting in 1945, if you add up Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War, Gulf II, and the GWAT, the Global War on Terror, in 75 years, 103,000 Americans were killed in combat. In 1 year of the Biden administration, 110,000 Americans were murdered through fentanyl and drug overdoses because of the open border. So let's just stop for a second and do the math. 1 year of open borders, more Americans murdered than 75 years of military combat. That is a war. When the president says this is an invasion, this is a war, this is bigger than 9/11, he's right. 9/11 was 3,000 people. We have 110,000 in a year. So he declared war on the cartels. He designated them as terrorist organizations, which opens a whole toolbox of judicial tools that are needed, because this is a war against innocent Americans. I have a former FBI agent who now does drug counseling in the prisons in Northern Virginia. And he made this point to me that kind of was like a gut punch. And he said, do you know why you never meet somebody who's, on rehab from fentanyl? Because when you overdose on fentanyl, you die. That's it. You don't come back from that. You don't get Narcan and come back and go to rehab. Fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction because 110,000 Americans are killed by it every year.
It's a real death sentence. And look, I think it's important what you guys are doing, Doc. I think it's important what the president is doing to combat illegal immigration. One, fentanyl is a disaster. It is a death sentence, and we have to save as many Americans as we can. I think it's also important for the economy of the country. I mean, there's just an idea, Doc, from Democrats that immigration is a right guaranteed to anyone, wherever they are in the world, to just come into our country whenever they so please. And the American people are saying we have had enough of that. And President Trump is finally the only president in the modern era to finally say, you know what? We are going to set up some very stringent roadblocks. You want to come into our country, come in legally. You have something to offer. We want you to come legally through a process. But we're not just going to open our doors open for just everybody, because you do not really have a country if you don't have any type of borders. You just have a collection of people living on a plot of land. And I don't think that's the way most Americans want to live.
No, if you don't have borders, you don't have sovereignty. If you don't have sovereignty, you're not a nation. And I say this as someone who is a legal immigrant to the United States. I chose this nation because I believe it to be the greatest nation on God's green earth. But I got in line. I took a number. I paid my dues. I took a test to become a U.S. citizen. Oh, and more important than any of that, paying the money, waiting 3 years. Guess what? When I passed my citizenship test, I took an oath to the U.S. Constitution. I didn't spit on it with my first act by crossing the border illegally. I took an oath to the U.S. Constitution the day I became a citizen. So look, let's be very honest about this. This isn't about immigrants. The First Lady is an immigrant. This is about illegal immigration, and it's about understanding that the relationship you have to America begins with your relationship to the U.S. Constitution. And that's, look, why did the president have record support from the Hispanic community? I mean, Stark County in Texas, 93% Hispanic, votes overwhelmingly for President Trump. Why is the Black community voting for President Trump in record figures for any GOP candidate? Why? Because who gets hurt the most with illegal immigration? It's not you. Nobody's going to steal your podcast because they swam across the Rio Grande. I'm not going to be replaced at the NSC by somebody who, came in from Afghanistan illegally. Guess who gets hurt the most? The people at the bottom of the income ladder who are trying to make it, who are trying to come up the ladder, the people who came here legally as immigrants, who are paying their taxes, okay? Along comes somebody who says, hey, I'll do Jose's job for 50% cash under the table. Who are you hurting the most? You're hurting the minorities. You're hurting the working classes, which is the irony. What have we been told by the Democrats for decades?
They're supposed to be the working class party.
They're here for the working class, for the small guy, for the minorities. Who are they hurting the most? The people they say they represent. But I think the majority of Americans are seeing through the lies.
Yeah, Doc, look, I think you're absolutely right. Before we let you go, is there anything you want the American people to be aware of that you guys are working on that really isn't getting the type of attention that it should be getting in the mainstream press?
Look, I can't tell you that because I work in a skiff 12 hours a day. I leave my phones outside, and I come outside the skiff and I say, oh my gosh, what has the president done in the last 30 minutes? I can't keep up with the president, his speed of function. He's 25 years older than me. If I had half of his energy, I'd be a happy man. What I do is, let me send you a message. Instead of what you're not paying attention to, is just send a message. It's the message I gave to the CPAC audience a month ago. Smile, take a breath, take a minute, touch the grass, and celebrate what you did in November. Because it's not over. We haven't saved the republic yet. You're seeing what these lunatic judges are doing to protect rapists, murderers, trying to get them back into the country instead of shipping them out. So things are still in play. But just for a second, revel in what you as a patriot did back in November, because you deserve to. I walk around the White House. I've been called the scariest guy on television by Jesse Waters, but I can't stop grinning I walk around the building with this massive rictus Joker grin because I'm so happy that what we are doing, what we promised to the American people is happening right now. But those people who put President Trump back in the Oval, hey, take a minute, celebrate, crack a cold one, and smile.
My friend, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to the President, Senior Director for Counterterrorism, National Security Council. Doc, where can people follow you to keep up with your great work?
Right now, it's just, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Look for Seb Gorka, Sebastian_Gorka on Instagram. That's about it right now. I'm not tweeting as much as I used to, but I'm still there doing it when I can.
Well, that's because you're hard at work. And by the way, guys, if you don't know this, Dr. Gorka is an avid shooter. He is a pro 2A guy, as pro 2A as they come. So we in the 2A community should be happy to have a friend like Dr. Gorka working for President Trump again. Doc, I appreciate you. Keep up the great work. And whatever we can do here at We the Free to put forward the message that the president wants to get out there to the American people, let us know. We're always here to advocate for you guys.
Well, listen, if I don't see you first at the range, you got to come to the White House and say hi, okay?
Anytime, Doc. Thank you.
God bless. Thank you, buddy.
All right, guys, this is Sher Michael Singleton. You've just listened to an amazing interview with Dr. Sebastian Gorka, a dear friend of the show, a strong supporter and advocate for the Second Amendment, talking about the great work that he's doing on behalf of the American people for President Trump to keep all Americans safe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.